No heroes. No heroes. No heroes, baby.
Hello guys, and welcome to week 2 of the Italian NCL. We have Enricomaria Rustico on Dofi versus Riccardo Borsari on Purple Luffy. Riccardo being one of the NCL Italy qualifiers and qualifying with his Purple Luffy deck as well. And yeah, let's jump straight into the game. We have Dofi being piloted by Enrico on the bottom, going first, so we can assume that Enrico won the die roll here, because going first is quite a significant advantage in this matchup. And Enrico does not have a 1-drop and does not have a teach, so has to go for the blind leader swing on 3 Don and only hitting a buggy, so not the ideal start of Dofi. Obviously, we all know this can be a lot more explosive. There could be a Jimbei and another body on the board right now. So Riccardo is certainly very happy to see that. And I have to shout out Riccardo at this point. Already, by the way, giving double 2k here for the very first swing. So people, pay attention. This guy is one of the most experienced purple players. And he's been playing purple ever since OPO1. I remember regional in Karlsruhe, where I faced him in, I think, round 3 or 4, Red Green Law versus Kaido, and yeah, ever since we've seen each other here and there at tournaments, and yeah, he's just a very, very top-notch purple player, very experienced, so if Riccardo decides to defend that first life in this matchup, you can take notes. I assume it's in big part to play around pudding, because if you take this life here, you also want to lead ability, then on Dofi's 5 Don turn, you are very vulnerable to pudding. You will have 8 to 9 cards in your hand, depending if you will have 8 to 9 cards in your hand. This is something you can play into if your opponent didn't have teach, because in this scenario it would have meant that the only thing Enrico would have on his board is a pudding, and if Riccardo could have developed like a 4-drop on his 3 Don turn by lead abilitying and then going into Luffy Taro, for example, then that's something he could go for, but if he gets pudding, he's obviously not guaranteed to draw into those pieces, into the Luffy Taro specifically, so just playing it safe and already just doing the fast 9 Don turn here for the 9-drop Luffy, going down to 2 HP, which is obviously a bit risky against Dofi, but he's saying, okay, I have this big 10k body on the board, and it's just gonna either remove a body every single turn or take one of your life every single turn. So really putting on the pressure and still getting puddinged. I'm not entirely sure how many cards it was. I assume it was something between 7 and 8. I mean, we can do the quick count, right? So this was technically his, let me think, 5 Don turn only, right? Because on 3 he ramps to 4, plays a Bon Clay, ramps to 6. Yeah, so this was technically only his 5 Don turn. So he would have drawn an additional card on 3 and 5, going to 7 overall. And then he took 3 life, being at 10, and he countered twice, and the Luffy replayed itself. So he was at 8 cards for this pudding. And yeah, already going down to 1. And something we have to note about Riccardo's deck is that he does not play the 9-cost Lin Lin. And that's obviously a very instrumental card in this matchup. Being able to go into these quick ramp scenarios and then still refill your life so you don't simply die to a perfume turn. Like you can bait Dofi into knocking you down to 0 and then in preparation for their perfume turn, and then just heal back while clearing their entire board, and suddenly you are in a winning position while dealing damage to them and then setting up with maybe 1 or 2 giants to survive an all-in swing from leader the following turn. But getting puddinged after already being down to 2 life and then taking a couple of 7k swings is quite rough. and Riccardo just tries to find some pieces, find some giants with his Orojuros here. But now having at least 3 big swings, assuming Pudding can swing, it's even 4 relatively big swings. Still being on 4 life, this looks quite promising for Enrico in this spot. And Riccardo is only at 5 cards in hand, so this game 1 might be over fairly quickly. 7k swings are the natural number here, because it's the sweet spot between incentivizing Gum Gum Giant, but also not allowing Gum Gum Giant to achieve its full counter value, right? The worst swing you could do would be an 8k. 9k is debatable, but you still sort of let Gum Gum Giant reach its full 9k, like its full 4k buff power, and then he only has to give a 1k. So by investing 2 more Don to this law, you would essentially only get a 1k, but in general, every single additional Don you attach is worth 1 more card. In general, like, there's scenarios where things are different, but for example, attaching 1 Don to this Pudding will always take 1 card. This is of course talking about when a character has already reached the baseline of the target they are attacking. A Don attached to Teach right now would not do anything yet, right? You need to attach 2 Don to just get him to that attacking baseline. That being said, after that, every single card is an additional 1k counter necessary. So yeah, and we do see just triple 7s and quadruple 7s. Having to give 2k, 1k here, still being on 2 cards. The issue is that Riccardo only has 4 swings at his disposal against what seems to be like 5 cards in hand and 4 life. The way to win for Riccardo here would be having the 9-cost Mom, doing like swings into board, and hoping that Enrico would not have enough counter to defend his board, and then there would be a world in which he could win. Like this, it's looking very rough. Just he will take that very big swing to his face. Maybe he can double blocker up and hope there's no perfume. There's certainly worlds in which he still wins this. But yeah, he's just scooping. He doesn't have a blocker. He doesn't have a heal. So they are going straight into the next game. And I find it quite interesting that Riccardo chose to stick with the very same list. I think it's the very same list that won the qualifier for him. Obviously, you never change a winning team. But in my mind, as a player in the NCL myself, and also I would assume, or I would actually say that I have some expertise on both of these decks, having played both of them a lot. Like I just brought Purple Luffy to the Treasure Cup this Saturday and did fairly well with it. I mean, X2, top 64. And the format of the NCL would, at least, if you don't want to go for like risky counter picks and stick to your pet deck, you know that Enrico is very, very likely to play Dofi, right? There's simply no merit for him to change off this deck. And I myself would certainly want to include 9-cost Lin Lin in my list if I knew that I was facing Dofi. Especially being on 4 9-cost Luffy, a card that you have 8 searchers for in your deck. I think there's some diminishing returns, right? Because especially against Dofi, you will not have enough time to play 4 9-cost Luffys, or even 3 9-cost Luffys in a game. And these additional copies that will very likely find their way into your hand will basically be useless. And if they were 9-cost Moms instead, then you would still have the option to go for 9-cost Mom in those spots where they are simply better, like when you are at 0. But yeah, Riccardo, as I've said, he's still a much more experienced purple player than I am, so he will definitely have his reasons. And maybe he was thinking, okay, it's so obvious that Enrico is gonna play Dofi, So maybe he's actually gonna counter me and do... Because if something is so obvious, it is very powerful to do something else, right? If you've been doing the very same thing for basically a couple of weeks, a couple of months, Enrico qualified for Worlds with Dofi, then it can be even more surprising if suddenly, even if it may seem random, just switches to another deck, suddenly brings out like a Rush Zoro or something. But to be fair, that matchup I would also prefer 9-cost Mom. So I can't... Maybe something like Lucci or something would be where you would prefer the 9-cost Luffys. But yeah, we do see this time Riccardo taking the lead in playing the game, like as in going first. And Enrico's already taking a pretty considerable amount of time for this Perona stack. So I'm wondering if he's considering to actually bottom deck it. But he seems to be very interested in... Yeah, he's going like with his thumb, okay, draw this, play this, draw this. So I don't think this is going to the bottom. And yeah, he's just gonna pass from here on out. We do have a 5k swing into what's likely going to be leader ability combined with... I would prefer going for Bon Clay in this situation, but Zorojuro at least replaces himself and forces your opponent, sort of, in quotation marks, to actually have the bounce law. And otherwise he's obviously just a very useful attacker sticking on the board. At the same time, if this gets bounced, I can imagine that Riccardo is going to spend his hand cards to counter that swing, just to be safer against pudding. So if he has it, okay, no bounce actually, but I still expect double 2k here, if he has it. Yep. We saw the Usuhachi being searched anyway, so likelihood of him having another 2k is very high. And yeah, no Jinbei here, so not as explosive. And I think if Enrico had spotted a bounce law in those top 5, he would have gone for it. And if he had Teach and bounce law in hand, he probably would have gone for that as well. So we do actually see the swing onto the characters here, right? Which is also sort of Luffy's win con in this matchup, in my opinion. Like, you just go into board to drain Luffy's resources from hand and set up a scenario where you have complete board control and can then eventually kill them in 1 or 2 turns, guaranteed. And this 7-cost Sanji is actually super crucial in this matchup. Just coming out as soon as the 4th turn, basically, or the 7th, what would be usually the 3rd turn, would usually be the 5-don turn, where Dofi can only respond with 6-don in his turn, and being able to draw 2k already in that spot, and then having that 7k baseline to draw cards every single turn from then on is sometimes even more powerful than just playing a Luffy Taro combined with something like a Sangoro, because that Sangoro or whatever you get from the Luffy Taro just might get Josu'd or something like that, and in the end then you have an 8k instead of 7k, but you missed out on an entire attack on the turn that the Sanji came down, for example. And of course the resting property is sometimes very relevant as well. So here we do see a 9k swing into the Sanji actually, or like we have already seen, which I think is an interesting choice. And this is likely going to be 8k after Boa effect into Zorojuro, I would assume. Which is an interesting pivot here. I assume that Enrico has a hand that's sort of... Maybe he has like a Gehören, yeah, and that's 8k into Zorojuro, because we can see that 2k, 1k is enough to defend it. Maybe he has like a Gehören in hand, because he's playing sort of like a more resource-oriented playstyle here, and he recognizes that if he were to swing face in this spot, even bringing Riccardo down to 1 life with 2 big swings could lead to trouble here, because he would have to give up his board to some big swings, and then even something like an Onami blocker could be enough to sort of stabilize Riccardo in combination with like a Gum Gum Giant or 2, and suddenly Enrico could be in a lot of trouble. Enrico himself giving 2k 1k to an 8k swing here, and we do see another Zorojuro actually. I would assume being followed up by a 5k swing to face, keeping 1 active Don for Giant. So not going straight into a 9-drop here. This would be another spot where, yeah, probably 9-cost Luffy would have been very strong, just being able to go like... Okay, he's just going for the 6k, yeah, not wanting to be at 8 Don next turn again, right? Because that's obviously something you always have to consider. If my opponent forces me to Giant or incentivizes me to Giant in a specific turn, if my next turn I will only be at 8 and then have to leader ability to play the 9-drop I want to, the Giant is actually not giving me as much as I would like to. So using it while you are on 10 Don and won't be actually suffering from the consequences of the -2 Don is in many scenarios a lot more efficient than going for these hindering lines where you actually feel the minus of the Don. Because I'm just explaining the concept for maybe some newer players who are watching and tuning in. If you are on 10 Don, you are suddenly losing a resource in the generation of 2 Don every single turn. So using cards that actually minus Don, as long as it's in the range of -2, basically lose their downsides, since you gain back the resource generation of the Don, and you will either way be at 10 Don next turn. So, something to keep in mind. So we do have Boa here, predated by a 7k Weevil swing, and followed up by another 7k swing with lead ability into a Jimbei. Hitting the Jimbei here is super clutch, and another Boa, wow. So this is a turn. It's gonna end up being an 8k swing from Dofi leader here, and I'm curious if this swing went into live. I assume it... Actually, okay. I think I missed something, right? So did Riccardo end up using leader ability anyways? Yeah, he did, okay. So that's very interesting to me, because he basically sacked alive to be able to play Gum Gum Giant and be at 9 Don next turn without leader ability. Interesting. So it's actually a 9k swing even. Yeah, commentating this on my own. Sorry for not catching everything. They are playing very fast, so I just missed a few details here and there while talking at the same time. But yeah, this again would be a spot where a 9-cost Lin would be clutch. We can go 6k into the Jimbei, but our leader swing could be nullified here. We just start off with an 8k into Weevil, I assume. Enrico is at 5 cards in hand, maybe even 6. Wow. No, I think now he has 3 left, right? No, he has 4 left. Okay, and we're going 8 into 7 now at Jimbei, which is giving block 2k. We are gonna go for another 7 likely, but this is already, we are running out of attacks, right? We only have leader swing and Zorojuro swing left, and there's still 4 big characters on board, and at least 2 of those are gonna stick. So what we are facing as Purple Luffy next turn is gonna be something like potentially 999, or involving, even if there might be more characters surviving, yeah? So it could come down to 7, 7, 7, 7, 8 or 9. This could get rough. We do have a 6k. Getting another 2k here, was it? Didn't quite see that. We have some glare on Enrico's camera and another 2k. So Enrico really flooded with counter and just a 5-cost kit coming down. Riccardo being at 1, 2, 3, 4 cards in hand with 1 for Gum Giant. We do have a blocker on Enrico's side, but yeah, this is just a spot where 7k swings are gonna hurt you so much. This is already sort of forcing the Gum Giant to be played, because if you give it 2k, 1k, like, you can never take, that's clear. Blocking is also inefficient. And giving 2k, 1k will make a 5k swing really strong. So yeah, he's actually just saying, I need more options. If you have perfume, you have it, but I need a better way to sort of work around these 7k swings. And I think sort of at this point it doesn't really matter that much, because I didn't math it out, but this does seem like a spot where it's just mathematical lethal to me. And yeah, Riccardo's doing the math himself. Enrico's just like, math is for defenders, I'm just gonna swing natural numbers. And we do get double 2k here. And I think another 7 here forces Giant, leaving him with... Oh, is it 3 cards in hand? Okay, it's 3 cards. But yeah, it will force Giant likely. If Riccardo can manage to survive here, a board of 5 potential attacks, if he gets to also keep the kit, which seems unlikely. But even if he has to sacrifice the kit, 4 attacks could be enough to... Oh, he just has perfume, okay. Just going perfume and all in. I'm curious if maybe a poking 5k or 2 would be better first. Because likelihood of him having like 1ks is higher after Giant. Because, yeah. I mean, he's just straight up dead, okay, he has like another Giant in hand. But generally I think 2 poking 5ks is actually optimal there. And yeah, that's already the game. We have a quick 2-0 from Enrico's Dofi, showing us just, again, the power and the consistency. Even though he didn't have a great opener, that's just Dofi things. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was Jan Skip Birkemeyer, and I'll see you guys next time.